The eyes that once looked at you with warmth now seem to avoid your gaze. The voice that used to uplift you now feels hollow, rehearsed. And the laughter, the shared jokes and stories, begins to echo with an unease you cannot name. Something inside you whispers a question you've tried to ignore. Was any of it real? Friendship, one of the most sacred bonds in human existence, has the power to shape your happiness, your choices, and even your identity. But what happens when that bond is built on illusion? When the person you trust the most harbors resentment, envy, or manipulation behind a polite smile? Psychology doesn't just ask who your friends are. It asks, why are they your friends? What do they seek from you? And more disturbingly, are you seeing them as they truly are, or only as you wish them to be? This is not just about betrayal. This is about the science of masks, the mind behind the charm, and the hidden red flags that psychology has been warning you about all along. At some point in your life, you've probably found yourself quietly wondering, why did they change? Or maybe a more unsettling thought crossed your mind, were they always like this, and I simply refused to see it? That eerie moment, when a familiar smile begins to feel unfamiliar, even dangerous, is not just personal. It's psychological. It's where the science of human behavior starts to speak more clearly than words ever could. In psychological terms, fake friendships are rarely revealed through one obvious act of betrayal. More often, they're hidden in subtleties. The pause between their compliments, the hesitation in their encouragement, the emotional distance wrapped in politeness. These are not accidental cracks in the relationship. They are often the byproducts of something more deliberate, the construction of a social mask. A fake friend doesn't just pretend to care. They behave in calculated ways to extract something from you, your energy, your validation, your connections, whatever it is they're after. So the question becomes more complex. It's not simply, what makes a friend fake? It's this, why do people fake friendship at all? Psychology turns to the patterns, not just the stories. One of the clearest explanations comes from a group of behavioral traits known as the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These aren't just labels used in movies or dramatic arguments. They are real, research-backed frameworks for understanding how some individuals manipulate and exploit others, often without remorse. Take narcissism, for example. According to Dr. Keith Campbell, narcissistic personalities often enter relationships to reinforce their own self-image. They seek admiration, and they surround themselves with people who make them feel significant. But the connection is shallow. Once your ability to boost their ego fades, so does their interest in maintaining the friendship. If you've ever had a friend who seemed magnetic during your victories, but mysteriously absent during your losses, you've likely brushed up against this kind of narcissistic behavior. Then there's Machiavellianism. This trait describes people who are strategic and manipulative, often using others like chess pieces. Psychologist Richard Christie, who helped shape our understanding of this concept in the 1970s, found that individuals high in Machiavellianism are not motivated by emotion but by outcome. They'll mimic care. They'll reflect your values. But they do it all for leverage, not for love. And psychopathy, though often misunderstood, adds another layer. It isn't always violent or criminal. In fact, many with psychopathic traits are socially skilled. They're charming, spontaneous, and often exciting to be around. But that charm is surface level. What's missing underneath is empathy. When relationships are no longer stimulating or useful, they abandon them without looking back. If someone in your life seems magnetic one day and disturbingly indifferent the next, you might be seeing the glimmer of this darker dynamic. Beyond psychology, even philosophy has tried to map the moral structure of friendship. Aristotle, in his exploration of human relationships, identified three types of friendships: those of utility, those of pleasure, and those of virtue. The first two, utility and pleasure, are where fake friendships often reside. They are built on temporary needs and shifting interests. And when those needs change, so too does the bond. This brings us to a quiet reflection, one that psychology doesn't answer directly, but instead encourages you to observe over time. Do the people in your life support your silence as much as your speech? Do they remain present in your darkness, or do they only return when you're shining again? And when you speak your truth, do you feel like you have to rehearse it first, out of fear that it might be twisted, misunderstood, or used against you later? Genuine friendships nurture who you are becoming. They offer safety without condition. But fake friendships? They often leave behind a residue of confusion. They don't just drain your time, they distort your sense of what's real. As we move forward, we'll begin to unmask 5 distinct types of fake friends that psychologists and philosophers alike have warned us about. But before we name them, take a moment. Think about that one person who's always been close, but never quite feels safe. The one whose support sometimes feels like a performance. The one who shows up, but only in the way that benefits them. Could it be that what you're calling friendship is something else entirely? And before we dive into the 5 types, here's something simple you can do. If, by the end of this video, a certain someone suddenly comes to mind, or if you realize you've been ignoring those quiet red flags, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps the channel grow, and honestly, it lets me know this kind of real talk matters. And if you've ever had to deal with a fake friend, drop a comment below. You never know who needs to hear your story. And if this feels like the kind of content you want more of, you know what to do. Subscribe. I'll be right here, unpacking the psychology behind the masks. You probably didn't notice it at first. They laughed with you, shared plans, made you feel like you mattered. But then, only when they needed a ride, a favor, or a connection, they showed up again, just long enough to take, not to give. This is one of the most subtle yet dangerous signs of fake friends, the opportunist. This type of friend isn't interested in who you are, they're interested in what you offer. They're drawn to benefits, not bonds. If you find yourself being constantly leaned on but never supported, you're not in a friendship. You're a resource. In psychological terms, opportunistic behavior is often linked to narcissistic and Machiavellian traits. People high in these traits frequently form toxic friendships that operate on a transactional level. They weigh every interaction, not for emotion, but for advantage. To them, connection is just a strategy. One study from the University of Georgia on dark triad personalities revealed that individuals with higher narcissism and Machiavellianism are more likely to form short-term alliances based on gain. These are not relationships rooted in mutual respect or loyalty. They are shallow, shifting, and entirely self-serving. But this doesn't mean they lack charm. Quite the opposite. Opportunistic fake friends often appear generous, attentive, and even fun. They ask about your day, they celebrate your success, until you stop being useful. And when that day comes, their absence will be louder than any words they ever said. It starts small. Maybe they disappear after you say, no, just once. Maybe they always seem to cancel when the spotlight is on you, not them. Maybe they're suddenly enthusiastic when you mention something they could benefit from. A new job, a new contact, a new opportunity. Ask yourself this: if you remove the advantages they get from you, would they still be around? This is one of the most overlooked psychological signs of a fake friend. They mimic closeness when it benefits them but pull away the moment emotional effort is required. And they're experts at masking their true motives. Their friendliness isn't fake in the traditional sense, it's performative. It's tailored to look genuine while remaining completely conditional. How do you spot fake friends like this before it's too late? You begin by paying attention to the emotional balance. Real friends show up in your silence, not just your spotlight. Real friends offer without expecting a return. But an opportunist will make you feel guilty for your boundaries and distant when you need them most. Friendship, by nature, should be a sanctuary, a place where your needs aren't transactional but understood. If being close to someone feels like constantly managing a negotiation, it's not friendship, it's exploitation. And that exploitation often hides behind practiced kindness. Here's where it gets deeply personal. Have you ever hesitated to share good news with someone because you knew they'd only ask what's in it for them? Or worse, you expected them to twist your happiness into envy, or your generosity into expectation? If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained, but can't quite explain why, it's not just your imagination. Toxic people, especially those who thrive on others' resources, often drain your energy by subtly demanding more than they give, disguising their demands in politeness. Philosophers like Martin Buber once spoke about two kinds of relationships. In one called I, people treat each other like objects, something to use, something to get something from. In the other called I, thou, people see each other as real, meaningful, and human. With fake friends like the Opportunist, you're rarely seen as a person. You're seen as a means to an end, something useful, not someone valuable. If you feel like you're constantly auditioning to be treated with basic respect, take a step back. You are not difficult. You are not selfish. You're simply noticing that someone close to you isn't being real. And that moment of clarity? That's not paranoia. That's your emotional intelligence waking up. In the broader psychology of fake friends, opportunists are everywhere. They exist in workplaces, schools, families, even in long-standing relationships. But once you start spotting them, you can stop enabling them. Because knowing the signs of a fake friend is the first step to building relationships that actually nurture your growth. The real danger isn't their presence. It's your silence in response to it. The longer you allow yourself to be used, the more you'll forget what it feels like to be genuinely cared for. And that's not friendship. That's survival dressed in social niceties. You've probably met them. The ones who always seem to have the latest scoop, the inside story, the whispered secret passed from one friend to the next. At first, it feels exciting, like you're part of something exclusive. But soon, a quiet discomfort creeps in. Because if they speak that easily about others to you, you start wondering what they say about you when you're not around. This is one of the most deceptive signs of a fake friend, the gossip chameleon. They blend into every social circle. They mirror emotions, nod along with whatever you believe, and often seem like the one friend who's on your side. But their loyalty doesn't lie with you. It lies with attention, drama, and the constant rush of being the one who knows everything. Psychologically, this behavior is often rooted in status anxiety and a fragile sense of self-worth. According to social identity theory, people who don't feel secure in their place among others often turn to gossip as a form of social control. By sharing secrets, they position themselves as valuable. They want to be needed, not for who they are, but for what they can reveal. These toxic friendships can feel intoxicating at first. The gossip chameleon makes you feel trusted, chosen, even favored. They open up quickly. They share drama. They whisper. And that whispering creates a false sense of intimacy. But real closeness doesn't come from talking about other people. It comes from the kind of vulnerability that risks judgment, and the kind of trust that never leaves bruises. You might notice that they always have a conflict to talk about, always frame someone else as the villain, and always shift their opinions depending on who's in the room. One day they agree with you. The next, they echo someone else's exact words. And the worst part is, they often sound sincere every time. But here's where the psychology runs deeper. Research on relational aggression, a subtle form of social harm that includes gossip, exclusion, and passive manipulation, shows that individuals who gossip excessively aren't just expressing themselves. They're controlling narratives. They create alliances. They damage reputations while maintaining their own image of innocence. So ask yourself, have you ever left a conversation with this kind of friend and suddenly felt anxious about what you said? Have you ever caught yourself wondering if something you shared in confidence might resurface in someone else's voice? That unease isn't random. It's your inner radar picking up on psychological inconsistency, something your nervous system notices long before your mind catches up. How do you spot fake friends like this before they erode your trust? Watch how they treat others behind their backs. Because eventually, that's how they'll treat you. One of the most overlooked but powerful psychological facts is that consistency is the true test of character. If someone can be kind in person and cruel in absence, they aren't kind. They're rehearsed. Philosophically, this touches on a core question of ethics. Do we value truth, or do we value comfort? The gossip chameleon chooses comfort, social safety, attention, and popularity, even if it means distorting reality. And over time, being close to them will make you distrust not just them, but yourself. You'll start filtering your words, shrinking your truth, wondering if you're next on their list. Fake friends like this don't always come with loud warnings. Sometimes they come with a smile that feels warm on the outside, but cold underneath. Here's something to consider on a personal level. If someone constantly brings you negative stories about others, are they really protecting you, or are they manipulating what you think? If they only seem close when there's chaos to share, are they showing care, or feeding on drama? A real friend protects your name in rooms you'll never enter. A fake one profits from your name the moment you leave. These are the quiet wounds of toxic people. They don't leave bruises on your skin, they leave confusion in your heart. And by the time you start noticing the damage, they've already rewritten the story in their favor. Remember, bad friends don't always look bad. Sometimes, they look exactly like the person you thought had your back. It's subtle at first. You achieve something, a new job, a personal breakthrough, maybe just a moment of joy. You look to them for celebration, expecting a cheer or a kind word. But what you get is a quiet shrug, a passive-aggressive comment, or that forced smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. This is one of the most dangerous signs of a fake friend, the kind of friend who can't stand your happiness. The one who claps with their hands but not with their heart. This is the envious saboteur. At their core, these individuals are fueled by comparison. They don't just want to be happy. They want to be happier than you. Your growth threatens their self-image, because your progress reminds them of what they haven't done. And rather than face that inner discomfort, they chip away at your confidence, one subtle remark at a time. Psychologists often describe this kind of behavior through the lens of social comparison theory, first introduced by Leon Festinger. According to this theory, people evaluate themselves based on how they measure up to others. For some, this leads to healthy inspiration. But for the envious friend, it breeds resentment. And that resentment becomes poison in the relationship. You'll recognize it not in their words, but in the timing of their reactions. They might joke about your success, downplay your achievements, or suddenly go silent when the spotlight lands on you. And when things go wrong in your life, they're unusually present, sometimes even a little too eager to comfort you. Because in your failure, they feel safe again. What makes this type of toxic friendship so hard to detect is that it doesn't always look toxic. On the surface, they may seem loyal. They remember birthdays. They show up to events. They use words like, "I'm proud of you." But somehow, you still leave the conversation feeling a little smaller, a little more uncertain, a little less worthy than before. This type of fake friend thrives on emotional sabotage. They don't need to overtly attack you, they just need to plant enough doubt to keep you from rising too far ahead. It's not just about what they say, it's about the energy they bring when good things happen for you. And deep down, you can feel the tension between your growth and their comfort. Sigmund Freud once spoke of narcissistic injury, a term describing the inner wound people feel when their self-image is threatened. The envious friend lives in a constant state of this wound. Your light casts a shadow over their ego, and instead of stepping into their own growth, they try to dim yours. So how do you deal with fake friends like this, especially when they've been close to you for years? The answer is clarity. Not confrontation, not drama, just clarity. Start by noticing the pattern. Are they more present when you're struggling than when you're succeeding? Do they ask questions when something goes wrong, but change the subject when something goes right? Do they mask sarcasm as humor, but only when you're sharing your dreams? If the answer is yes, you're not overreacting. You're observing the emotional truth of your connection. Philosophically, this brings us to the idea of authentic friendship, as described by thinkers like Aristotle and even more modern voices like Viktor Frankl. True friends are not just there when life is hard, they're genuinely joyful when life is good. They don't feel threatened by your success because they measure their worth internally, not through comparison. So here's a question that deserves reflection. If your friend always makes you feel a little guilty for growing, are they really a friend? Or are they just holding the door open until you outgrow the room they're still standing in? Bad friends often wear the mask of support, but underneath it is fear. Fear that you'll become someone they can no longer control or relate to. In the end, one of the most important lessons from the psychology of fake friends is this: envy doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers encouragement laced with doubt. And those whispers, if you listen long enough, can turn into your inner voice. You don't owe anyone your failure to keep them comfortable. Sometimes, it doesn't feel like a friendship, it feels like a performance. But you're not the one acting. You're reacting. Carefully choosing your words, weighing every sentence, tiptoeing through the conversation as if the wrong tone might break something invisible. This is one of the most psychologically exhausting signs of a fake friend, the emotional manipulator. They don't yell. They don't insult. They don't even always lie. What they do is twist. Twist your words, your intentions, your truth, until you're apologizing for things you didn't do and doubting things you know in your bones are real. At the heart of this manipulation is something called emotional blackmail, a psychological tactic where one person uses guilt, fear, or obligation to control another. Dr. Susan Forward, who coined the term, described it as a silent weapon. And when used by someone close to you, it's one of the most painful forms of control because it hides behind the language of care. This type of toxic person may start a conversation with kindness but end it with you questioning your sanity. They may say, "I just want what's best for you." But what they really want is control over what you choose. They often shift blame subtly, making you feel selfish, ungrateful, or even cruel when you assert your needs. You might find yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, overthinking. You might feel like you're always on trial, trying to prove that your intentions are good enough to earn their approval. And even when they offer forgiveness or warmth, it feels like a favor, not something freely given. Fake friends like this are not always malicious. In many cases, they've learned manipulation as a survival strategy. But intention does not erase impact. And the impact is always the same: you feel small, powerless, confused. According to psychotherapist George Simon, emotional manipulators often rely on tactics like gaslighting, a term that refers to making someone doubt their perception of reality. This is more than just disagreement, it's distortion. You say something hurtful happened. They say you're too sensitive. You ask for space. They say you're abandoning them. You express a boundary. They say you're the one who's toxic. And after enough of these exchanges, you stop trusting yourself. But here's a key psychological fact. Confusion is a red flag. In healthy friendships, you feel clarity. You feel heard. You feel safe to speak, and even safer to be silent. In manipulative friendships, you feel like you're always one step behind, chasing the approval of someone who holds emotional power over you. How do you deal with this kind of fake friend? Start by listening not just to what they say, but how you feel after they say it. Do you feel more grounded or more scattered? More confident or more unsure? Do you feel like yourself or like someone they've trained you to be? Philosophically, this raises the question of freedom within connection. True friendship should never cost you your autonomy. It should not reshape your values, your tone, your emotional landscape to make another person feel secure. Real friendship holds space for your complexity. It doesn't collapse under your honesty. And if you're wondering whether you're overreacting, ask yourself this. Have you begun rehearsing conversations before you even have them? Do you second-guess your emotions when you're around them? Do you feel like your truth needs editing just to keep the peace? That isn't peace. That's psychological tension dressed as harmony. Toxic friendships like these are often the hardest to walk away from, because the manipulator knows how to make you feel like the bad guy. They'll remind you of everything they've done for you. They'll say things like, "After everything I've been through for you," or, "You're the only person I've ever trusted." And suddenly, it feels like leaving them is a betrayal. But the real betrayal is staying in a friendship where you have to shrink yourself to be loved. The psychology of fake friends reminds us that emotional manipulation doesn't just damage your connection to others, it damages your connection to yourself. You stop trusting your instincts. You question your reactions. You lose sight of your own emotional compass. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before them. You know the feeling. They say they're joking, but something stings. They say, "I'm happy for you," but their tone tells a different story. They compliment you, but somehow you feel insulted. This is the signature behavior of the passive-aggressive pretender, a master of mixed signals, hidden jabs, and carefully disguised hostility. Among all the signs of a fake friend, this one is perhaps the most confusing. Because on the surface, they appear polite, even supportive. They rarely raise their voice, and they rarely confront anything directly. But underneath that controlled smile is a storm of resentment, envy, or unspoken anger they refuse to admit. This type of behavior is often described in psychology as covert aggression. Unlike direct conflict, which is open and visible, covert aggression is subtle. It's the art of harming without ever looking like the villain. And fake friends who rely on passive aggression often get away with it for years because they leave no clear evidence, just emotional residue. One day they forget to invite you to something. The next day they make a sarcastic comment in front of others. And when you confront them, they say, "You're being too sensitive." Or, "Can't you take a joke?" That's how they shift the blame onto you and protect their image. They don't apologize. They explain. Or worse, they make you apologize for reacting to what they refuse to admit. This is where toxic friendships become especially damaging. Because instead of addressing problems, these friends weaponize silence, sarcasm, and ambiguity. They won't tell you they're upset, but they'll withhold kindness. They won't insult you outright, but they'll share backhanded praise. And if you call it out, they'll say you're imagining things. The danger here is not just the hurt, it's the self-doubt. Over time, you start questioning whether your feelings are valid, whether the tension you feel is real, whether you're reading too much into their words. But your discomfort isn't overthinking, It's your emotional intelligence speaking up. How do you spot fake friends like this before the damage spreads deeper? Start by listening to what isn't said. Watch for inconsistencies between their words and their behavior. Do they say they're happy for you, but change the subject quickly when you talk about your success? Do they offer support, but their actions tell you otherwise? Do they praise you publicly but criticize you in private, or the other way around? These are not quirks. They are patterns. And patterns reveal truth, even when people refuse to speak it. Psychologically, passive-aggressive friends are often emotionally immature. They haven't developed the tools to express frustration or envy directly, so they act it out in distorted, indirect ways. And because they rarely take ownership of their behavior, they trap you in a loop where you're always trying to decode their meaning instead of living freely in your truth. Philosophically, this touches on the concept of emotional responsibility. A genuine relationship thrives on honesty. It allows space for disappointment, disagreement, and even discomfort, without guilt or games. But a bad friend who hides their negativity behind politeness is not preserving the friendship. They're poisoning it from the inside. So let's get personal for a moment. Have you ever felt like you had to pretend not to notice someone's disrespect, just to keep the peace? Have you ever smiled through subtle digs because calling them out felt like overreacting? Have you ever left a conversation replaying it in your head, wondering if they meant what you think they meant? That's not friendship. That's emotional camouflage. And no matter how charming the delivery, hostility wrapped in politeness is still hostility. The psychology of fake friends teaches us that emotional safety matters just as much as loyalty. A person who makes you question your value, your voice, or your sanity is not a safe friend. Even if they never raise their voice. Even if they never say anything directly. Even if they laugh while doing it. Because real friendship isn't afraid of honesty. But fake friendship is terrified of being seen. If you've made it this far, chances are something resonated. Maybe a face came to mind. Maybe a feeling. Maybe just a quiet, uncomfortable truth you've been pushing aside. The psychology of fake friends isn't a list of dramatic betrayals. It's a deeper, quieter erosion of trust that happens over time. It's the confusion after a conversation, the guilt that doesn't match your actions, the strange ache of being surrounded but not supported. Friendship is supposed to be one of the safest places in life. It's where we turn for laughter, for truth, for support when everything else feels uncertain. But when that place becomes clouded with manipulation, envy, exploitation, or passive cruelty, it doesn't just hurt, it shapes the way we relate to ourselves. The research is clear: toxic friendships affect more than your emotions. They increase stress, weaken self-esteem, and even impact your physical health. One long-term study from UCLA showed that individuals who experienced high levels of social tension in their close relationships were more likely to develop anxiety, depression, and chronic stress-related symptoms. And yet, so many people stay. They stay in friendships that drain them because the idea of leaving feels selfish, harsh, or unkind. But here's what psychology helps us understand. Setting boundaries with fake friends isn't selfish. It's survival. It's not cruel. It's clarity. You are not obligated to keep people close simply because you've known them for a long time, or because they once meant something to you, or because they know your story. The truth is, not everyone who knows your past deserves access to your future. So how do you begin to heal? How do you deal with fake friends and reclaim your emotional space? You start with one simple but powerful question: do I feel emotionally safe with this person? Not entertained. Not distracted. Not needed. Safe. If the answer is no, that's not something to ignore. That's your mind, your body, your intuition, telling you the truth long before you find the words to describe it. The signs of a fake friend are not always obvious. But your nervous system feels what your conscious mind tries to dismiss. It notices the tension, the tone, the energy. And it remembers. It stores that discomfort until eventually, something cracks. Don't wait for the crack to become a collapse. Don't wait for a louder betrayal to justify your distance. Trust the small signs. Trust your subtle knowing. And here's something else worth remembering. Just because someone is not outright cruel doesn't mean they're kind. Just because someone hasn't betrayed you yet doesn't mean they're safe. And just because you once shared good memories doesn't mean the relationship is still good for you. Toxic people often survive on your willingness to doubt yourself. They hope you'll minimize their behavior, excuse their inconsistencies, and silence your own intuition. But the more you listen to yourself, the more clearly you'll see what's real and what's been cleverly disguised. In the end, the goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone. It's to become honest with yourself. To recognize when your kindness is being exploited, when your empathy is being used against you, and when your loyalty is no longer serving your peace. Because real friendship doesn't drain. It restores. It celebrates your wins, stands through your losses, and allows you to be fully seen without fear. And when you finally remove the weight of fake friendships, something amazing happens. You make room for the kind of connections that don't just feel good, but do good. The kind of friendships that don't ask you to shrink, perform, or explain your worth. The kind that feel like coming home.